Well, so thank you everyone, and welcome back to those who have spent part of the day or afternoon or morning with us, and welcome to those who are joining us for the first time. I'm Carol Fletcher, and I am the team lead for Messy Church Canada, and I am the lead on the conference planning committee. And I have the honor tonight of introducing Sandy Brodine, who I first met in 2019 at the International Messy Church Conference, but it feels like I have known her forever for the ways in which her ministry has supported mine and my share of Christ's ministry, and the creativity and appreciation that she has within the wider community. So Sandy is an ordained minister of the Uniting Church of Australia, which is very similar to a United Church of Canada in that we both have the same founding denominations. The difference being that the United Church of Canada founded itself in 1925, and the Uniting Church of Australia came together, I think, in 1976.
No, 77. You're very close.
77 came together.
Very close.
1977. So when I met Sandy, it was at the Messy Church International Conference. And Sandy has a real place in the international Messy Church community as a person who has contributed to the writings of the Messy Discipleship book, and who has written for other publications that are yet to come.
Oh, good.
And Sandy, is just a joy to have you with us. So thank you and welcome as we think about what ministry and creativity and all ages means. Thanks, Sandy.
Thank you so much, Carol, for that incredibly generous introduction. I really appreciate it. So there's a PowerPoint coming up, which mostly has photos of my communities, just to give you a bit of a sense of what ministry looks like in my world as we go through. So in my previous life, I was a Chinese and English teacher and taught religious education. So education and teaching is really, really sort of, you can't take the girl out of the class. Well, you can take the girl out of the classroom. You can't take the classroom out of the girl, or you can't take the desire to help people to grow in their lives and faith, in this case, out of the girl. So I think for me, all ages is the real key to growing discipleship, because all age ministry is about community and relationship and growing disciples. And what was that line from Lucy this morning, Carol?
The line from Lucy is, "We are the best church when we are together with people who are different than us."
Fantastic. So yeah, so welcoming people of all different shapes, sizes, colors, sexualities and everything is just such a gift for all of us. So this little photo is my I have 3 worshiping communities that I minister to particularly. One is a contemplative community that meets on a Thursday night, and it meets now at the moment on Vimeo. So we basically is an upload of a video, and then we chat on Messenger at the same time as the video is playing. So when we have the long time for prayer, we pray in the chat to one another. So it's like we're together, but we're not. And it also means that it can be viewed asynchronously. So people who are, we've had one of our Messy Church mums in hospital just recently having a brain tumor removed, and she's been watching those contemplative services when she's been feeling stressed as a meditation, and that's been an incredible gift for her. So being able to be in this strange new world with hybrid possibilities and different ways of doing church has really been helpful. So that's one of my communities, the contemplative community. And the other two, which you'll see photos of today, are this is actually Common Ground. This is my little Sunday morning intergenerational all age church. which is kind of a hybrid somewhere between Sunday church and messy church. And also I'm a messy church leader. So we have a messy church as well. So I'm going to be sort of speaking about, I'm going to be showing you photos from a number of those things in order to kind of tell the story about the how I do all age ministry in order to help people grow as disciples. So as a former teacher, I am more than happy if you want to ask questions as we go in the chat. That won't disturb me at all. If I see them, I've got them sitting there, and if I see them as we go, I'm happy to answer. Just want you to have a think before we start about times in your life where someone of a different generation from you has helped you grow in your faith. So it might be, you know, when you were a child, someone who was older than you helped you grow in your faith. For me, I would say my 10-year-old daughter is forever opening my eyes to all sorts of faith experiences. And one of the practices Common Ground has on a Sunday morning is to give thanks to God. And the way we give thanks is by noticing where God is present in our lives. Where we've seen God's movement in our lives during the week. So I wonder if you either if you feel comfortable, you might want to name somebody just with a first name. So I'm just going to put Sophia because that's my daughter's name. And if you don't want to put it in the chat, you can write it on a piece of paper. Just name someone who has been instrumental in your faith, who is of a different generation to you. Thanks God for Sylvia's grandmother. Thank you, God, for Mabs. Thank you, God, for Miss Menzies. Thanks, God, for mums and brothers and aunts, and for Dorothy. Thanks, God, for John Patrick and Olivia Sinclair.
Put down Laurie.
And Wilma.
They put Laurie in?
Oh, not the one up there. Well, you actually both of them are.
Thanks, God, for the 2-year-old. After Jeff baptized, the 2-year-old looked intently at Jeff and said, "Thank you." Oh, Jeff. For Laurie and Laurie, which I probably didn't pronounce properly. Thanks, God, for Ken. Thanks, God, for all of the opportunities we've had to meet intergenerationally and all in an all-age way, and have people from other generations help shape us in our discipleship journey. Amen. And you can keep doing that if you like, if those people occur to you. So Carol mentioned the book. This is the book, Messy Discipleship. So there's the beginning of the book has the research that's been done by, what are they called? The church. What are they called, Carol? The it'll say it on here, won't it?
Church Army, isn't it?
Church Army, thank you. And the last 5 chapters are chapters based on the 5 values of Messy Church. So Graham will just show you those. The 5 values, keep going, Graham. Sorry. The 5 values of Messy Church are there, and there's a chapter on each of those. So I wrote the creativity chapter, and the all age chapter in the book is actually written by Chris Barnett, who Chris was my Sunday school teacher, so I could put his name in the chat too. But then we led youth group together. He's only about 5 years older than me. He's not heaps older than me. And we've created Holy Mischief together for quite a number of decades now. We get up to all sorts together, which is fantastic. So the 5 values there are Christ-centered, creativity, all age, celebration, and hospitality. Did I say one twice? That's the 5 values of Messy Church, and they all absolutely lock in together and all happen together. And if anyone is missing, it's a problem. It's a really helpful thing just to have in your head as you're planning and thinking, to be really intentionally thinking about how you're bringing the values out. Thanks, Graham. Now, another great gift to Messy Church is Holy Habits. Those of you that were at the conference in 2019 will have heard Andrew speak. Claire Dorr, who's speaking after me, and I had planned, we had a great big plan, and Chris Barnett, who I was just talking about, had got us some money. We were going to get Andrew out to Australia in July 2020, and we were going to have a big, tour around Victoria. It was going to be awesome. And as you know, well, that didn't happen, did it? And then we thought we could do it in 2021, and obviously that isn't happening either. But Andrew, in the meantime, has joined us by Zoom a number of times. And in his book, he's got 10 holy habits that come out of Acts 2, 42 to 47. And if you go on to the next slide quickly, Graham, you'll see, I hope you can actually read those. There's the 10 values are down the bottom there. And the 10, none of this is rocket science. They're like the Messy Church values. They're really simple, really obvious things that come out of Acts 2 that you can grow and develop in order to grow and develop your discipleship. And what's fantastic about this is that you can do it across Messy Church and across any intergenerational group that you have. They work beautifully across all generations. So if you go on to the next slide, Graham, this is 2 examples of it working beautifully. On the left is 3 of my very dearest people here. We started we read the Holy Habits in groups, and we called them fellowship groups. We started a fellowship group with about 8 of us, and these 3 people, Kathy, Jen, and David, are in that group. Kathy and David are both. Kathy calls herself. What does she call herself? An outsider or a hanger-onerer. So she's not really a member of the church, but of the network, but she has a deep Christian history. And David is brand new into our congregation, and Jen's been there forever. We started this group at the very start of lockdown last year. So we've really only ever met online, but the deepness of the sharing through people's cancer journeys and journeys with children having horrible operations and putting parents into care has been amazing in terms of that deep spiritual sharing with one another. We've done prayer, learnt to pray together, learnt breath prayer together online. It's just been amazing. So there's an article about that in our Victorian magazine that you can have a look at if you want to, about how we've done holy habits in our network. And on the right there is an example of our that's actually our church camp, but it's a lot of our Messy Church people on church camp. I can't remember why they were pulling machines apart, what that had to do with God or what they were learning about. I really don't remember what the point was, but gee, it was fun, and the kids got so into pulling apart old phones and old wirelesses and stuff. It was just fantastic. So all age discipleship works beautifully. Just really quickly, for those of you who weren't here yesterday, I'm going to zip through the why. So if you can just go on to the next slide there, Graham. So you heard from Linnea the other day, I think, about Jesus about storytelling in Messy Church, and I made the point yesterday that Jesus is the foundational storyteller of our faith, and he taught his disciples by telling them strange, complicated stories in parables, and the way they learnt was by making mistakes, because we know from the Gospels that the disciples stuffed things up probably more often than they got it right, but they learnt in that play. They learnt in those mistakes. So creativity, telling stories, exploring, wondering, making mistakes and trying again are all key elements of Jesus's teaching methodology, of the way he is a creative leader, and so he's our best example of how to do this. Next slide. And I made the point yesterday too that this has happened throughout the church, throughout history. So that were just some very quick examples that I shared yesterday from the catacombs in Rome to say that, in fact, the early Christians made meaning by drawing pictures to remind themselves of the story and to wonder about the story. Thanks, Graham. So if you think about it, when we've talked about the people in our lists, we've learnt from people in our lives about our faith. It's not a surprising thing. And right from the time of the Old Testament, from the Hebrew scriptures, there's stories about people learning their faith at the knees of older people. And I'm sure you can think of those stories even as I say it. And of course, you know, Jesus in the synagogue and Jesus with his family and all sorts of ways that he learned his faith and that he shared faith with little children. So it's not surprising that for most of human history, kids have been at the centre of learning communities around faith. But in the 19th century, at the rise of the industrial age, when kids suddenly ended up in work, they decided that they needed to teach children on a Sunday. They needed to keep them busy, and they needed to teach them. So the Sunday school movement began in the 1800s as a way to educate children, and it was a good way for when the schools started, for at least the children that had to work, the poor children, to at least learn to read and write their name and to learn something about the scriptures. And I suspect it became the foundational way that the Western Church, or certainly the Anglo Church, has operated ever since. We have kids in Sunday school, the adults doing proper church, and so all age opportunity to learn together and grow together has completely disappeared. And I don't know about your experience, but my experience is that what that achieves is it inoculates children and young people against church because they see it as something boring that the old people do, rather than seeing it as something which grows them and develops them, rather than seeing it as their family and their community that they can grow in. So encouraging us to go back to that idea that it takes a village to raise a child, and all these people you've listed here are fine examples of people in your villages who have helped to shape you. Time to return to that predominant paradigm of all age community. That's my preaching for the morning done. So go on to the next one, Graham. So in our, these are spot the Canadian in this one. I can see Sylvia there on the far right. This is when Carol and Sylvia came and joined us in Melbourne at Common Ground. Our Common Ground community doesn't have preaching. So this is what you're looking at is preaching at Common Ground in those photos. We have what I call curated meaning making or shared meaning making, where the moment that you take the biblical text and you tear it apart and do the wondering and thinking about what's going on happens together. So it looks reasonably similar in some ways to what it looks like at Messy Church, although it's not exactly the same. It's sort of, as I say, it's a hybrid partway in between. So you can see some really lovely examples there from 3 different Sundays of us making meaning. And the next slide shows you something about the fact that it doesn't matter about how you do the craft. Now, Sylvia, correct me if I'm wrong, but that one on the left is yours. Sylvia will say it might be mine. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. Sylvia's just saying 16-hour flight, then playing with different coloured sands that might spill. So this was You Are the Salt of the Earth, and You Are the Light of the World was what this one was. And so they were creating salt mandalas. And the one on the right is Adele, who's not all that fussed about how it happens. And so there was some really fantastic conversation around the tables, I remember, about what happened when we mixed together and could you have too much of one colour or not enough, and how did it all work? So there was some really interesting theological dialogue out of what was a really simple conversation. And it was all age dialogue, because there was Sylvia's very different way of doing things to probably 9-year-old at that time, Adele, and fantastic discussion about it. On the next one. So the next one on the left is a cafe church we did with our traditional congregation and Common Ground just before lockdown. So that's kind of, looking back on that, I want to sigh, because that's what things used to look like and haven't looked like for a while now. And on the right, an activity that was probably some Play-Doh mats, and you might think Play-Doh is a good kids activity. But if you look there, you've got some adults well and truly doing it together. And on the next one, which is one of my favourite all-age photos of all time, this is where Wendy, who's got to be in her late 80s, she's heading for 90, down on the floor with the Play-Doh, with 2 other adults, not a kid in sight. Well, there's one hiding behind the Advent wreath there, you can see, about to walk into shot. But it's the older generation using that activity. And my point there is to say that, there's no kids activities and adult activities. There's just different ways of engaging people of all ages. And of course, that's intergenerational too, because Paul and the lady who's on the right, whose name I can't remember because I think she's only been twice, they are actually younger than Wendy's kids. So they're 2 generations younger than Wendy. So that, even though there's no children present in that photo, is actually intergenerational church. So moving on, there's all sorts of ways you can pray together, which prayer in our communities are always collaborative. Everybody adds their things into the prayer. So you can see on top of the communion table there on the right, that was our celebration of our 3rd anniversary. Our banner we made at our very first service, and on top of the table all sorts of things we'd made that day, and the prayers on the floor, praying for all the things that we appreciate about our community. And on the right there at Messy Church, on the left, sorry, at Messy Church, Pippa, who's just come back from working in Tanzania, praying in chalk on the outside. And of course, that's lovely because it leaves a real witness for everyone who walks past during the week. Next. So this one is interesting, because one of the things that I think sometimes happens in our Messy Church is we think we're being intergenerational by producing something for little kids to do. And we forget that actually you've got people of all ages. And I've heard Lucy Moore say that, occasionally when she visits Messy Church and she's an adult on her own, it's really difficult because often there's not something for her to engage in, and she would like there to be differentiation in the way we do our activities. And this is a really simple example from when we're doing angels at Christmas. So on the left, there's 3 different ways of doing the angels, and I would always have a number of them. There'd be something that is a kind of gross motor, big hands, kind of kids who are just learning to cut and glue and whatever can do. Something that's more specific that maybe older kids would do. And the one in the middle there is a really kind of origami. You've got to be a sort of a ninja origami kind of expert. So for teenagers or adults who really want to kind of, practice that sort of doing something complicated. So differentiating is a really good tip for helping things to become all age. Sylvia, these were done as part of Messy Church. So yeah, so the ones on the outsides are actually examples, and I confess that the one in the middle is a photo from the internet, because I can't origami, and I think the ones that we tried weren't so fantastic, but we had fun. Next one, thanks. Another thing we do, which is an all-age experience in our network, is the Labyrinth, and I'll show you a large photo next of the Labyrinth. What you can see there is what's exciting for me about the Labyrinth is I put together stations which explore the story. So usually we do either the Christmas story or the story of Easter. And when we do that, people of all ages interact. So my daughter will not miss the Labyrinth. And in fact, she'll do it 2 or 3 or 4 times every time we put it on. That's my daughter there hugging the baby Jesus. I think she was about 5 or 6 there, and her friend Jan behind her looking over her shoulder at the baby. And that was just, they were just there. That's not a staged photo. That was just them. What you can see behind them is the foot, they're sitting at the foot of the cross, holding the baby Jesus, talking about faith. And on the left, that is an activity that would have been about the wise men thinking about gifts. So they would be making gifts out of plasticine. If you go on to the next one, you can see that's the inside of the church. So all the pews are moved out, and the Labyrinth mat, you can see, takes up the entire space of the floor. That would be a Easter one, because those rocks would have been carried as burdens and placed at the foot of the cross. And there's Soph again, praying the Labyrinth. One of my favorite Easter Labyrinth stories is the contrast between Sophia and the way she understands it. So at that point, she was a pre-reader. And so usually with pre-readers, we'd walk around with them and help them, but now she does it herself. But on that same Labyrinth, we had she would have been in her late 80s, early 90s woman do it who had cancer. And one of the stations had myrrh, and it was talking about Easter Saturday and anointing yourself. And so this lady had anointed herself with that oil. And when she got to being in palliative care, she asked her elder to come and bring the same myrrh with her to anoint her again, as she was, facing her death in the last couple of days of her life. So that had really kind of entered into her spirit as something special. See, Jeff's just said, I have observed that sometimes children give adults permission to not only walk the labyrinth, but to dance or skip the labyrinth. Yes, they do indeed. So it's really interesting to note just how something like that, which gives the prompts for prayer or the prompts for entering into the story, actually can allow people right across the generations to enter in. So we do that in Messy Church, and people from right across the community enter into it as well. So going back to yesterday again, if we can go on to the next slide. I don't know why my computer's binging. I'm sorry, that's my daughter's friends talking. I can't turn that off, I don't think. Can I? Hang on. I think I can mute them, sorry. I'll stop talking. Do not disturb. All right. So we talked about gardeners' multiple intelligences yesterday. Sorry, it was me. Or a whole lot of 10-year-olds in lockdown talking to each other. Multiple intelligences works beautifully in an all-age context because we all have our passions. So if you found a kid who was really interested in stars, then Mark would be the perfect person to have in the same church community, because the two of them, despite generational difference, would be passionate about the same thing. And that passion would spark off each other in a beautiful, beautiful way. Or someone that was really into, if you get a real maths nerd kid and a real maths nerd adult together, they can really, spark off each other. So having lots of different range of possible opportunities for people to do the things they're passionate about as part of Messy Church and all age communities really helps build community and build discipleship. So today I'm going to just look quickly, if you go on to the next slide, at another two, which are sort of polar opposites, really. The intrapersonal, the things where we think about things ourselves. So they're often things like journal writing or breath prayer or a silent walk of the labyrinth on your own, those things where you're with God in your own space, and the intrapersonal, which is when we're all together with other people, engaging with each other. And so if you go on to the next one, Graham, this is really good for any activities that are to do with feelings. And it's very useful for people who are not in touch with their own feelings, to give them the opportunity to actually enter into that. And a lot of kids who might have things like ADHD, who aren't used to actually connecting across to their feelings. So for example, this is one we did earlier in the year when we were still together. How would you feel if you were inside the Zacchaeus story? So if you were in the crowd, how would you feel if you were in the crowd when Jesus came? How do you think Jesus felt when he saw Zacchaeus up the tree? How did Zacchaeus feel? And the idea was that they had to make a face. And you can see we made the faces with leaves and things out of the garden. So everybody, of the parents, all bought stuff as well. So we had a real mix of things, had the whole community involved in bringing the stuff for the craft. And we all made faces of how we would feel. So it was partly that thing about yesterday about creatively inserting ourselves into the story and imagining inside the story and wondering about it, but making that interpersonal or intrapersonal kind of connection. Interpersonal as you think about it yourself, intrapersonal as you share it with others about the story. So all of those things are really, really important ways to help people across the ages to interact. Next one. One of the really exciting things about intergenerational all-age church is it allows us to share power. I don't know if you've thought about it, but when we have proper grown-up church and we send the kids out, what we're saying is this is our space and you have to leave our space and go somewhere else. And when the grown-ups are always the ones up the front having control of all the words and the input, what it says is we have the power and you don't. And so one of the exciting things about messy church done well and intergenerational worship where it's really thought about is it absolutely shifts the dynamic of power. And I love, this is Wally on the right there. Wally is a retired minister who's got to be in his 90s and just the most delightful man I know. And on the right there, I love that photo of his hands, because all you can see you've got the two boys really kind of engaged. I can't remember what we were doing with the letters, but the boys are really engaged in what we're doing. And all you can see is Wally's gnarled 90-year-old hands engaging with him, with the kids thoughtfully, sharing together in meaning making around prayer and around story. Next one. This is another one we've done together with our kids and the teenagers, particularly taking control. And so this was a Make a Difference project where we asked the kids the kids decided they wanted to lead the whole church in doing something together. So it took 4 weeks and we investigated and thought about nature and the world and what they wanted us to do. They led all of this. And then the last week, we went out into the world, and you can see that on the right. We picked up rubbish in the local park. And that's the horrifyingly large bags of rubbish we picked up in the park together, which was great. So that was the teenagers taking the lead and taking the power. Next one. Really easy ways to do this are with the celebration in Messy Church, getting everyone up on the stage, everyone involved in the play, everyone doing stuff rather than just the grown-ups. Next one. Oh, sorry, that's gone into the video. I thought that was there. Developing leaders, opportunities for kids to develop their leadership skills as they grow when you give them the power to lead. So this is Jonty on the left. These are science experiments from, or that at least is a science experiment from the Messy Science book. That's the one where you stick a Mentos into a Coke bottle and it all goes like a volcano. So we can't see us, we're all up here, and he's taking us through us and asking us the questions. And my Soph on the right there teaching, all playing with the kids and getting the kids to make giant bubble wands and doing that together. So letting the kids lead and take responsibility and take the power. The really exciting, the next one. The really exciting, this is Messy Young Leaders. If you haven't heard about this, I don't know how it would fit into Canadian time zones, but where it's been set up, the two guys on the left, Dylan and Jonathan, lead this in the UK, and it's online, and our Australian kids join in with them. So they're trying to help kids 10 and over to join in Messy Church and to grow together. And it happens across the planet, and it's pretty exciting. It's on again tonight, in fact, Messy Young Leaders. One of the most exciting things we've done, which has been all age and has helped to shift the power and have the kids be taking the lead, is our Messy Miners. And if you just go onto that next slide. In Messy Miners, what happens is, I think you asked yesterday about skill sets, and I said, I don't actually know how to do Minecraft myself. If you head on to the last slide, Graham, the kids have to take the lead because they're the ones who know how to do Minecraft. There's a couple of the adults that do as well. So the kids choose the stories, the kids and the adults together build the stories. When we were doing it originally, I'd suggest things and the kids would say, oh no, Sandy, you can't, that won't work. You can't. And roll their eyes at me, and I'd say, well, okay, well, how do we do it? Okay, tell me what to do then. So it completely shifts. I'm no longer the minister who says, this is how it is. They're the ones who say, no, it has to be this way. Okay, fine. And we become a team of equals where we all share stuff. I just thought I'd share one last glorious example of prayer from Messy Miners. We pray in all sorts of different collaborative ways in Messy Miners. So we've done prayers of thanks and prayers for the world and prayers of confession. So this is prayers of confession from Noah's Ark. And if you want to roll that video.
The next thing we're going to do is praying, and you were going to explain that, Sandy.
Oh, I was going to explain that. Okay, can everybody just take your hands off your cursors and off your device and just hold them in the air so you can listen? So what I want you to do is we're going to think about something that we're worried about, or maybe something that isn't so good, something that you might want to be washed clean of. Sophia says there's things I do that I need to be washed clean of. So, and so do we all, because we all make mistakes, don't we, hey? So what we're going to do now is we're going to have a little tiny micro build, and what you're going to build is you're going to build something that's a symbol of something you want to say sorry for, or that you're worried about, and then Jonty's going to put it in a certain place, and he's going to blow them all up. Okay, so we're now in the new area. So it's a micro build. You've got 1 minute. So it's only going to be something very small. So thinking about what you want to say, either sorry to God for, or what that you're worried about.
Because you know what it's meant to be, and God knows what it's meant to be, and that's all that matters.
I just need to put this green layer on the top, and then I'm good.
So these are the things in our lives we want to say sorry to God about, or things that we're worried about that aren't so good that we want to go away, or God to do something about.
Okay, everyone's going to stand on top of this hill and don't move.
Oh, that's your one.
Can we see them all blowing up?
Right.
Watch.
No! Mine's still
And
here.
God says it is all forgiven. Everything that you're wanting to leave with God, God will take away. Everything that you're sad about and unhappy about, God will be in and look after for you.
Rip pig.
All the things you want to say sorry about, God will forgive you for. Oof, there's a lot of blowing up going on.
And at the end of that session, when I said to the kids, so what did you get out of that? What did you enjoy today? One of the boys said, I never knew God could come into my mind and blow up the things I wanted to say sorry for. I'm so glad to know that. And if ever you wanted an explanation of what prayers of confession and absolution is all about, I think that's it, really.